Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to After the Message. This is our video podcast where we're going to get to go back and unpack, Josh, your sermon from Sunday morning. I am excited about this one. I'm excited about all of them, but this one in particular. Always great to have you on here to kind of dig a little deeper into what you preached on. But today we also have May Wright. May, this is your first time on any podcast, right?
Any.
We are thrilled to have you.
Yeah. It's going to be great.
So May is one of our counselors at the Center for Hope and Healing, and she is actually a social worker. It's the first time that we've had a social worker on staff, and part of that is because as a social worker, she actually has a little deeper knowledge maybe into some of the topics that we're talking about today, specifically addiction. And the other part of that is, May, that's part of your story as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you can kind of come at this both from a very, wisdom base. Here's the knowledge. Here's what the books say. Here's what the training teaches us. But also experientially, I know what this is like.
Yes.
And so we are so glad to have you.
I'm thrilled
on the
to be here
today.
Thanks, y'all. Absolutely.
We're going to ask the hard questions and let you give the good answers.
You are the expert today, my friend.
We made a pact.
It's not often that happens.
We're here to give you all the questions.
So, and to our listeners, if you have not heard the sermon, you really need to go back and hear. You may be doing this in backwards order. Right. That's okay. But you really do need to go back and hear the sermon. I thought it was you took a very difficult subject and did it really well. And I know this one was maybe trickier or a little different for you in some ways because of some of your own history.
Sure.
What was it like coming into a sermon that you knew was going to kind of maybe push some buttons, tap into some things from your own?
Yeah, so I'll use a sports analogy for those who grew up playing sports or maybe even just love sports. Like every sports year, the schedule comes out, right? Earlier in the preseason or even before preseason will happen, and you get a kind of at a glance look at all the things that will take place, the teams that you will play, the places that you'll play those teams. And there's always one game on every calendar that you're invested in, and you say, that's the one.
Yeah,
That's the game.
Yeah.
That's the one that's going to take all that we have to win. It's going to take everything inside of us to do well in that game. And so out of this sermon series, of course, there are 9 topics in this sermon series. This is the one that, in that illustration has been circled on my calendar for about a year now.
Really?
Wow.
Because, number one, it is a weighty thing that a lot of people themselves are dealing with addiction, as we looked at the stat. But if you just take that stat in its singular stance, you would say, well, 1 in 7 people deal with addiction, and that's what we know. We know the stat's higher than that.
Right.
But then if you take that 1 in 7, then you have all the family members that are connected to that person, and they are experiencing addiction. No less carnage takes place in their life, but differently. Like their vantage point is different. So as a pastor, and counseling background, like that's circled there because it's such an important issue. But also, I've had a front row seat to that addiction world as someone whose parents both have walked that addiction path as long as I've been alive.
Memory.
And some of the stuff, funny, as I was preparing, looking back and probably over the last 20 years of doing my own therapy with my therapist or different therapists, but particularly Lisa, who's my therapist now, like looking back, thinking things that were normal, like every kid goes dumpster diving at the behind the K&B in Picayune because isn't that what you do on a Tuesday afternoon?
Yeah.
I had no clue. That was something because we didn't have money to pay for groceries. We would go and find the throwaway food that had expired, but it didn't have mold on it. And so like little things like that. And I look back and think, maybe my childhood wasn't typical as it were. So that's part of the emotion that even as a 42-year-old man, I am even now in real time dealing with it, fresh off my mom's death, which was an overdose, which was a long time coming. So it was a very unique sermon series and a unique sermon on this past Sunday.
Well, and I know I appreciated it, and I heard so many others who also commented how much they appreciate, not just in this sermon, but your transparency, your openness, and being willing to share some of those things from your own journey, because I think that helps people. And you mentioned it; it is a family struggle, right? I mean, you would say it's a family disease, right?
Yeah.
And I know that one of the difficulties, or at least stages somewhere in here for many people who struggle with addiction, and I think this is true for whether it's alcohol and drugs, or whether it's pornography or food addiction or whatever, is trying to figure out, like, is it really an addiction? Do I really have an addiction, or do I just struggle with this? Is it just a compulsive behavior? And family members and the struggler obviously don't always see that the same way, right?
Exactly right.
Yeah. Well, like my wreckage, the way I view my own wreckage will maybe look different than how my family views it.
Right.
And if I'm sick in addiction, they're going to catch things that I'm missing because I don't have the ability to see it yet.
Sure.
Surely looking back, once you're well, you may say, I can't believe I did those things. But when you're in it, it's so hard to see. And bringing up the topic of, what is an addiction versus I'm just having a glass every night, or, I'm just taking these pills, or I'm just doing this. I'm going to these websites. I'm overeating and struggling in that way. I think that it can look different to the family member. And also, I think about what is each family member's relation to addiction itself, right? What's their history with that? What knowledge are they coming in with to the family system on how to approach that? Stigma affects how we view things, how we treat it, how we approach it. And so if stigma is kind of driving that family mission and message, we're going to be looking at this a lot differently than if we see it from how most society, and especially the medical profession sees it today, is within the disease model, right? We know that it's treatable. We also know it's chronic.
That's right.
We also know that it can have relapsing and a recurrence of use, but still we know recovery is possible. And so even, in recent years, they changed the kind of the language behind it. So we had drug dependence. I don't really like that. And also think about drug abuser, right? I mean, you hear the word abuser, it kind of change the tone a little bit. Like,
That's a
I don't know
different
about
sound to
that,
it.
right? So person with substance use disorder, person with alcohol use disorder, opioid use disorder, and when you're kind of trying to figure out if it's an addiction, you really want to look at, well, what's happening around me? What does my life look like? Is my family okay with this? Like, is it something that is causing maybe not direct consequences as of this moment,
Right.
but what are some impacts that I'm seeing across my household and my workplace? Is this drink getting in the way of me being able to function in my daily life? Where is that showing up? And I think that when we just look at the criteria for addiction, right, for a substance use disorder, alcoholism, when I'm looking at that, I know that I may have to use more to get the desired effect.
Right.
I know that I may have to have a compulsion to use, an obsession to use. But am I using despite negative consequences? Am I using in light of adverse events that are happening around me? I know I'm about to lose my family, but I've got to do this.
Yeah.
That, to me,
Those are
when
some of the
I'm
big
using,
indicators.
when I'm using or drinking in spite of someone telling me this will happen,
Right.
and I still have to do it, that's a problem,
That's right.
So if I'm having to use it more often
Yeah.
to feel the same or to get the same response,
Yeah.
if I'm having to use more of it when I do use
Yeah.
it, if I'm being told by others around me that, hey, this is going to go badly if you keep
Yeah.
doing this, but I keep doing it anyway. If
Am I
I'm-
hiding it,
If I'm
you know?
risking things that are
Yes.
high value to me
Yes,
typically,
yes.
but I'm kind of blowing past those because I want to use.
Absolutely. And, and that's what my brain is telling me that I have to do.
Yeah.
And when you think about the desire to use despite negative consequences, it definitely brings up that just idea of powerlessness. Like, I have to meet this demand. And if I don't meet it, I feel like I'm going to die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the worst thing to happen.
Yeah.
I know rationally in recovery, it makes zero sense. 0 cents. If anything, the frustration and the anger and the grief that comes up is because this is something we do struggle to make sense of to begin with.
That's right.
So I feel powerless because I can't make sense of what you're struggling with.
Yeah. So, May, I'm going to ask you to do some counseling for me in this very real
this will be
moment.
good.
And this is not like role playing. This is just real life, because I hear that and I can't help but my mind flash back to my mom's last 3 months. And so my mom overdosed. The time before she passed away from an overdose, her second to last overdose, she ended up having a stroke. And in that time, my wife drove down from Madison to go pick her up, and she came and lived with us for about 3.5, 4 months. And it was during that time that we had to have some interventions, because in her stroke, she couldn't get to the pills that she would normally hide, whether it would be in her pockets or in the cabinet. And she was living in our house. And so we made sure we were regimented in our delivery of her pain medicine, because she needed it. But she didn't need 30 pills. She needed 5 pills.
Right.
But in that, we had a moment where she got sick and had to go to the hospital. And we ended up having to have an intervention in the hospital. And what she would continue to say is, you don't know how bad I hurt. I need this. They're not giving me enough. And I need the extra. And we kept telling her, no, you don't. You are going to die. Mom, you can't keep doing this. And for her, I believed 100% she loved me.
Yeah.
And she loved our family. And she understood that what she was doing was bringing some chaos to the scene. But what she would argue and advocate, and probably even still today, because you got to know her, she's a crazy, spicy Cajun in her lifetime, is that the pain that lived inside of her, she felt so much more than what she believed she was going to give out by living this lifestyle. So what do you say to a family member, as a clinician, as a social worker, as a counselor, and somebody who's walked that path yourself, of a family member, and they are convinced they need this. Like, it's not an issue of a luxury of, oh, I'm just do this because it's fun or it's extracurricular. They believe it is as elemental to them as water and air. They need that next feeling of no pain or the hit of whatever it is. What do you say to a family member who is begging them to stop, but they won't?
Well, I love the fact that you mentioned water and air, because that's exactly what's happening in the addicted brain. I listened to your sermon, which, again, I know we've kind of already shared that gratitude, but I want to reinforce that to you for being willing to share some of your personal story, because I know that is not easy, and it's not without pain for yourself as you share that. So thank you. When I think of what's happening in the brain, because again, it's one thing to read it in a book, to see it in a PowerPoint, to see it in a family member. It's another to experience it yourself, because it's so hard to reconcile. It's near impossible, because how do I make sense of a living, breathing human being believing that drugs or alcohol or anything else is more important than the people they love?
That's exactly right.
You can't make sense of it. And so for a family member that wants to say, just stop, I think there's power in being educated. There's power in knowing what is happening within the hijacked brain. Essentially, I don't think that our brains were built to have that much feel good, as you want to say, right?
Sure.
We weren't built to make sense of that. We weren't built to be able to come down from that. But they have a purpose, and they serve the people that desperately need them. And I'm definitely for that. And there's a time and a place. But when it's hijacking the brain is telling them those pleasure circuits are broken, essentially. So when those substances, which again, there are some that are even more problematic than other ones, where it's giving me even more dopamine, right? So my brain is receiving the message of, wow, this is great. If anything, I think people who end up struggling with addiction and going into recovery, I hear the same thing over and over again of, the first time that I had that substance, my life made sense. It was the key to the lock. It was the missing puzzle piece, and it made sense. It solved a problem I didn't know was there.
That's right.
Okay. And so how does a family member understand that? I don't know that they ever 100% will.
Sure.
But I think leading with compassion and some understanding and educating yourself and drawing hard boundaries.
Yeah.
Like sticking to, accountability works because it works.
That's right.
So drawing those hard lines and still holding firm on, if this continues, A, B, C, and D, right?
Right.
And I think having threads of compassion through that, though, because if we understand the disease model, if we understand that this is not just someone waking up, making the choice of, I like this better than you, let me go do this. their brain is saying, I need this like I need oxygen. I need this like I need water and air. Right. And when you are trying to survive, which I know that may sound dramatic to some people listening,
but it's very real.
But your brain truly thinks that it will not continue.
It was as if she couldn't breathe without it.
Yes.
Very
and
true.
I think that our perception of like the way that we relate to pain, the way that I interpret discomfort, I think it's a multi-tiered thing. I think there's a lot to it. My family history, my temperament, my upbringing, the way that I learned to deal with issues when I was a child. There's so many things that lead to, I think, the perfect storm of the first time the substance is taken or the drink is taken. It affected me differently than it affected you.
Right.
You know, it wasn't your missing puzzle piece because maybe you just had the whole puzzle.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So
there is so much in just that conversation that I would like to follow up on.
Yeah.
But I do think it's important. What you're talking about is it's not that the addict necessarily wants to do this just for pleasure each time, as much as sometimes when it's not there, they literally feel like they're going to die.
Yeah.
Like, I don't get this drug, I may literally die.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is obviously in the detox portion. If someone is trying to stop, they will describe those feelings sometimes in the detox.
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
I am dying. You've got it. You've got to get it for me now.
Yeah.
And it's not until they can get through that kind of that phase of it that they can begin to sort of think more clearly about things. Yeah.
Well, and bringing that up, you know, it had this thought just cross my mind of, it's easy to think, oh, they just, you know, they refuse to just feel like a normal person and be able to operate in the way that I do, you know. But the reality is I think for most people who struggle, it stopped being fun years ago.
That's right.
I mean, you're not out there having a blast, living your best life. Yeah. Kind of, you know, Preston and I were talking before we started this of no one, when they're writing down their hopes and dreams, says, you know what I'd really like to do with my life? And I think that once it's out of control, it's so hard, first of all, near impossible to set it back to where it was on your own.
Right.
And, you know, it has been said, though, that with recovery from addiction, one of the beautiful things, while we do, you know, some people struggle with the detoxing, some people struggle with the pain of that, you know, you have a beautiful opportunity to recovery from this illness. You can be even better than you were before. Right? Yeah. Like you can find a solution that you never had, and you wouldn't have had it had you not struggled.
Yeah.
And the testimony itself that you have, right?
Yeah. That's a beautiful way of looking at it, because I think a lot of people, if they can go through the recovery process, they realize this is not so much about me just not drinking. I may need to stop drinking or stop using or whatever to save my life. But if I think that's what it's all about, then I'm really missing maybe the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And I've talked to so many people that this is part of their journey, and they would say, it took me going through that. Not that I would wish it on anyone, not that I recommend it to anyone, right? But it took me going through that to realize the underlying factors that I had never addressed, whether that was the trauma or the pain from the past or whatever it was. Yeah. So the recovery process actually opened the door for them to come out healthier on the other side, not just to quit doing the thing, whatever the thing is, but to actually be a healthier person.
Absolutely.
On the other side.
You know, and because I've also worked in residential treatment, and one thing that we love to talk about was the iceberg idea, right? Like the tip of it is what you see. Yeah. You see the drug use, you see the drinking, the whatever the compulsive behavior is, you know, and underneath it are all the things that this is helping me not feel. And I think one big part of just my own recovery was realizing what my first substance actually was. And it was avoidance. It was an intolerance for discomfort. You know, I wanted to feel safe. I wanted to feel okay. And I think that innocently, when I got kidney stones, you know, very late in high school, I didn't, you know, I'm in the hospital, right? Yeah. And I'm just given something for pain. And I remember, and at this point I hadn't even drank. I remember thinking, okay, like this is absolutely what I've been missing. And I did not truly start acting on that until a little later, but I still knew my ability to
hook was set at that
take
point.
a little note. We're going to take a little note of that. We like that. And I think that I empathize with people who were just hit out of nowhere. Like, wow, okay, this answered a problem again. You know, I didn't know it was there.
I didn't really go looking for that. I went really, and you mentioned that we don't need to look at the behavior necessarily as rebellion.
That's right.
For many people, it's not, I am trying to rebel against you or against authority or against society or whatever. I'm trying to find relief for the pain that I'm feeling. And sometimes we go seeking something. Maybe someone tells us, hey, this will make you feel better. Sometimes we just stumble across it, but we realize it just met a need.
It did.
Right.
And then we're kind of into it, right?
And the scene was set, I think, for me personally, when that happened. You know, I had been struggling through just some family issues and some adversity up until that point, and not to get too much into the details, but I think that, you know, that was within my own terms a little relief from that of I can't talk about this and it's here, it's stuffed down. So this kind of just took the brunt of that, right? And, you know, whenever we look at it from that perspective, it gives some background to, well, what goes into it turning, we want to know the cause. Like I see that and I hear that all the time. What caused this? And it's so hard because it's such an interplay of so many different factors, right?
Specific.
Genetics. It does run in my family.
Sure.
But is that the end all be all? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Environment. The time you take the first substance, right? How young were you?
Right.
Because that has the ability to truly impact your brain structure and leave some, not lasting, because the beauty of recovery is that the brain can heal.
Yeah.
I stand by that.
Right.
There you go. We believe that.
Absolutely. And so when you're looking at what goes into it, that's where I really love and encourage other people and families is to take a step back and look at the full picture. How are we operating as a family? You know, are we honestly talking to one another? Are there some things that we could work on to also better support our loved one, right? Because I'm going to be, as a social worker, we operate kind of from a person in environment. So I'm looking at the person, don't get me wrong, but I'm also, hey, what does your support look like?
Right.
Like, you know, do you have a job? Are you fulfilled in your life? Like, what have you been, you know, you're wanting to just get that full capture of where a person is. And I think that gives us just a little bit more information about why maybe addiction took place.
Yeah. Certainly as a pastor, even as we sit with counseling many days with people who are walking very hard path, like, you know, if they walk in and say, hey, I'm an addict, or their loved one walks in and says, hey, he's an addict or she's an addict, or at least have these addictive behaviors, like there's certainly the first line is, hey, don't do that thing. Like, you know that's wrong, or you know that's not as helpful as you believe it to be. And then they share their story and you're like, I don't condone what you're doing.
Right. No, never.
But I understand
now why you are running to that, to quiet the noise, or to take the pain away, or to get away from the chaos. Like when we hear their story, there's an understanding, and it allows us as family members, as practitioners, as pastors or friends, to be a little more empathetic.
Yeah.
You know, I think I heard somebody talk about the difference in empathy and sympathy the other day. And like, you're sympathetic, like, man, I see you hurting and I'm sorry you feel that way. Like they used an illustration of someone drowning in the water. And you're in the boat and you see someone drowning and you call the siren and say, man overboard, somebody go get them. And that's sympathy. And empathy is you jump in the water with them and you say, hey, you can't swim, but I can swim with you. And we're going to swim this thing together and get to the back. And I think it's in those moments where we have a better understanding of the family in model. And we say, okay, I don't agree yet. I understand.
I think it brings a level of compassion for the person who's struggling, right? Rather than how could you or how dare you. It helps us to understand that this is coming from somewhere, to your point earlier, whoever and whatever they're struggling with, they didn't go into life saying, I hope my life goes down this road. I hope I throw away a lot of money.
Everybody
I hope
has
I lose
a story.
my family. I hope that is never the case. And even this week, I was somewhere at a store, and I passed, happened to be, I would say, a young lady who very obviously was on something. I don't know what, but I remember as I walked past, just in my mind thinking that is someone's daughter.
Yeah.
And that is this person is God's creation, and the design was never for this, right? The sermon really came out of this idea of that we have been enslaved to this world, not just to the sin of this world in the sense of like we sin, but we live in a sinful world, a broken world. And because we live in this broken world, we get trapped into things. And, we've talked a little bit about choice. There was a person, I wish it was me, it was not, who said, you make your choices, then your choices make you. And when I think about addiction, I think sometimes, not always, but sometimes that describes at least the beginnings of it, right? We make a choice, not really thinking I'm going to end up being addicted to this whatever, but as we choose that, we may have all these other things beneath the surface that as soon as we try that behavior, we go, oh, this feels really good. Either it has numbed the pain, or it has brought the pleasure, or it has done some of both. And then we may find that now the choice that we made is making us, in the sense that our brains, you used the word hijacked earlier, our brain gets hijacked to the point that we're not as capable as many would think of just making the choice to stop.
That's right.
That it takes sometimes the outside intervention. We can still agree to get help. We can still reach out for help. We can still have choices to make even in the addiction, but it's not as easy as just choose to stop the way some people would think.
Yeah. And I think that, I just thinking on times where even in other people's stories and people that I know and love that have struggled with addiction, sure, there are many moments where if you had just said you were struggling with something, or if you had owned up to the lie that you told, or you did this or that, and, I kind of have this inclination to just go, well, yeah, you're kind of right. Like had I just opened up, sure, you're absolutely right. But I got to tell you, it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah. Not at that point.
Right, not at that point. And, this really speaks to the value of seeking help, of seeking people who are trained in this, especially intervention, right? Going about it the right way that we can best ensure that our loved one receives not only the treatment they need, but like the support they need. Right. And we know how to navigate that. And I think that there's power in not just winging it, like having a plan in place, And I think also what you shared, Josh, just about how your family would come together to care for your mother. And I know that was no easy feat.
That's right.
At all hours of the day. But the fact that after all those years, you're still willing to come together to still be there for her is a beautiful thing. And I think that when we look at the people we love and we know they're struggling, we want to give them the best chance possible. Right. It's just so tricky because we don't know how it'll end.
Yeah.
We have no power over that.
That's exactly
Zero
right.
power. And that's frustrating, right? That's maddening. But we can do our very best, and just on the topic of enslavement, I mean, essentially that's what it is. I see that as in my brain, and kind of how I approach that with clients is it's just anything that separates me from the love and acceptance of God. And so if this is diverting all my attention, my needs, my desires, this is where I'm getting fulfilled, it's going to cause an issue.
That's right.
Right? That's going to separate me from that love.
Yeah. And I think a great, because you just gave a definition of, addiction, or at least a disordered understanding of how things are to work. And if we apply that, which I really like your definition there, a lot of times we think addiction only lies in pills and alcohol or pornography, right? Maybe the big three. But that definition brings into play a lot of stuff, whether that is picking up our phone 40 times a day, or maybe you're like, well, I don't touch my phone. Watching the news until whatever it is, like I need to veg out. I need to tune out of this moment of life because it's too much, or there's too much going on. So I'm going to go to that thing. And I know, sadly, we're getting close on our time, May, and you are a wealth of knowledge on two different fronts, having experienced this path yourself and also walk every day with people in this path. I gave at the end of my sermon a couple of what I believe to be helpful from my vantage point, things for the person that is in the act of addiction and the family member who is loving them. From your vantage point, what are some of the most helpful things from someone who is in active addiction? What do they need most from family and friends? And then from the other side of that, what would family and friends, what would be beneficial for them to know and understand about the addicted person and how they can best love and serve them? I'll give you a few moments to think about your answer, and I'll give you this. As my mom was deciding what she was going to do when we had that intervention in the hospital, and we were at Baptist here in Jackson, and I remember it feels so surreal, like a movie scene night. It was storming, like it was the whole thing. Like it was dark, it was storming. It's 11 o'clock at night, and she had called my dad to come and pick her up. And my dad at the time was high on meth, and how he made it to Jackson, I have absolutely no clue. But it was a night of a tornado, because the only reason I remember that is because I am fighting with my mom in the hospital, and my dad calls me, and he's in Terry in a ditch. In the side of the road. And so I have to go find him, get him out of the ditch to bring him to the hospital. It is an absolute goat rope. Absolute goat rope. And so she looks at me and says, "Am I free to go?" I said, what do you mean? She said, "Are you keeping me here? She said, "Am I a hostage?" And I thought, is that a possibility?
Is this my chance?
I'm in actually for that. If you're open to being a hostage, I will keep you. Because I think keeping you will keep you here. Right. But the moment I said, "No, you're free to leave," she said, "Then I want to leave." And so she leaves. And that night happens, and my dad gets her, and somehow not only does he make it here, but he makes it back to Picayune. And the very next morning at 8 o'clock, after she had gotten home and gotten her hit of whatever it was she was trying to get, she called me I messed up. I'm so sorry. But those were the boundaries that we had set. Mama, if you choose this, this is no longer an option for you. Because you are choosing this. And we had to put up some boundaries for my family, my daughters, my son, my wife. That was a chaotic moment that still lives in my brain. From your vantage point, helpful for the addicted person and helpful for the family members, what would you suggest? Not necessarily about my situation there, but knowing that my situation is very common, strangely, to a lot of people. What would you say to...
Well, I think that, hearing you use the word drawing boundaries, I think that's really healthy for families to do. I can ask myself, am I drawing a boundary and just a cold, hard, you're worthless, like following it up with really negative, impactful language? That's probably not the best approach. But am I letting them know that I believe that they are worthy of this? Do I still believe that they can get better? Because if I can't believe in them, like a hard 100% no belief, I'm going to tell you they're going to struggle to believe in themselves.
Sure.
So I have to kind of check myself as a family member, like how invested am I in this with regards to, do I believe they're capable? Because that's gonna affect how I approach them.
Even as you're setting boundaries, you're still expressing to them.
Yes, because the love is still there.
Yes, sure.
And I think communicating that is so vital. I also think it's really important for family members to still take care of themselves. So how am I treating myself in light of all of this? Because as it's a family disease, some people hear that and they go, well, I'm not the one with the problem, right? But their problem becomes your problem.
That's right.
And if anything, that kind of obsessive pattern of thought can happen within the brain of the loved one who's not struggling, because I'm so preoccupied with fixing you, with keeping you from doing what you are probably going to do anyways. And so drawing that boundary and then being willing to hold hard to it, right? To stand by it no matter what. And, for individuals that are struggling with addiction and for families, I think I really kind of want to press home really quick the value of treatment, the value of finding help, of being able to take, because essentially your brain needs to heal.
That's right.
And for different substances, that can be different time lengths, right?
That's right.
And so you need, at least a year. You need time. So the best way to get that is to be able to have the privilege, I recognize, of receiving treatment, right? And so reaching out to the right person to get really good advice, direction, guidance as to how to make that happen if you can. Where are the meetings in my area? Can I drive my loved one to a meeting? Do they need to have the car keys? If their addiction has progressed, they probably
not.
don't.
Yeah, maybe not.
Probably not. But can I take them? Am I just kind of leaving them high out to dry? What can I do? And I know some people may listen to this and think, well, you don't know what I was dealing with. And I hear you 100%.
Right.
But I think that as we invite our loved ones to change, we have to invite ourselves too.
That's right.
That's good. Good reminder.
I think sometimes we just, again, personal vantage point, we want life to be clean. And in addiction, it's messy.
Yeah.
And for us to love the people who are in active addiction, we have to get messy. And we that's a part of it. Like we just have to say, I am willing to walk in this.
And I think we have to be on the same page as families. Say, hey, we're all going to get messy.
That's right.
Yeah.
Everybody.
That's one of the hardest things is when you've got
It's going to take
one
all of us.
family member that's, I don't even want to acknowledge that it's an addiction. And another that's like, oh, it's an addiction and we need to jump in the mix.
Yeah.
It can create a lot of tension in the extended family.
Yeah.
So, and I just want to say as we wrap up here, if you're listening to this and this is part of your story, this is part of your family or close friend or whatever, reach out for help. There is help. And we have seen so many people not just stop a behavior, to go back to what we were talking about earlier, but have a life completely, radically changed, families put back together, lives restored, but you have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to give a shameless plug. I think a good somewhere to start is with May, because she understands this world.
Right.
And so she is available at the Center for Hope and Healing.
Yes.
You can reach out to us. It is so great to be a part of a church that has invested in resources to be able to help not just our church, but our community through things just like this. So thank you for being a part of the podcast today.
Yeah.
Josh, as always, thank you for not just for the sermon, but for the insight today. And we will look forward to doing this again as we continue our Holy Broken sermon series. We're not quite halfway.
So
going
it's a
into halfway.
9-week series. We just finished week 4. This week is Money Can't Fix This.
Money Can't
We'll
Fix
be in
This.
Mark chapter 10. So it'll be
still,
great.
Good stuff.
Several great, but sometimes tricky
Yeah.
subjects to tackle. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Preston. Thank you,
Love you
Meg.
guys.
Yeah. Thanks, y'all. I appreciate it.